Tell me about Akashic, how you came to the name.
I started Akashic as a record label, which was Akashic Records, I had never had a dream of doing a book publishing company. What I wanted to do was a record label. And then in 1995, 1996, Girls Against Boys, I was playing in the band Girls Against Boys, and we signed a big record deal with Geffen Records. We were in the right place in the right time. We got a great deal, and I had disposable income for the first time. So I finally got to start this record label, and I started it with the band Sevens. I believe the record was recorded here at Inner Ear with Bobby and Mark Sullivan. Bobby was the singer of Soulside, and he and his older brother Mark are two of my very best friends. And I wanted to start the label, and I asked them, do you guys want to be partners on this record label, and we can start with Sevens, your band? And they were totally on board. And it was Bobby who came up with the name Akashic, which is this Sanskrit word which refers to this concept of sort of an enormous library where all knowledge is recorded.
Well, there's a few different. So I did a little. I very rarely do research, and so I am familiar with. Do you know there's something referred to as the Akashic Record?
Yeah, it's sort of a pun.
So
because it was the record label was Akashic Records, and then it became Akashic.
Well, but it has an interesting meaning for that reason, right? So Akashic Records, for those who don't know, is basically it's the record of all time, and it is it's karma. And it's basically, it's like if you are, if you consult the Akashic Records, you're basically asking for like all the things that you and your ancestors have done,
right?
Because you're trying to make amends. So with that in mind, was that part of the spirit when you were trying to start it?
Well, I hope I'm not popping your bubble here.
No, pop it.
But Bobby came up with the name, and Bobby is a sort of spiritual seeker. I am not. Mm-hmm. Had I started the company on my own, it absolutely would not have been called Akashic.
You would have called it Listen to My Records?
Yeah, it would have been called, Route 50 Press or something like that. And so early on in the company, Bobby and Mark both basically became fathers. And in the early years, I was making really good money in Girls Against Boys for a few years. And the getting this little company off the ground just took a bunch of money. They were parents. They didn't have money I was making a lot of money and I had no kids. And so they stepped away from the company. And then I had to ask myself, do I want to keep the name, even though it doesn't really represent my vision? Mm-hmm. And so it felt like we had started to get a little momentum. So I didn't want to start from. I worried that if I changed the name, I would be knocking myself backwards.
Of course, yeah, sure.
So I kept the name, and I like the name, and I love it in particular because it's like Bobby is there, sort of with me,
right?
And Bobby is like a soul brother to me. So I'm certainly at peace with it. But it's interesting because people, like if we're at the Miami Book Fair or just in public settings, normally we don't sell our books directly to people. We make books and then bookstores sell them, but we will go to book fairs, and so people will come up, and sometimes people will recognize Akashic and they'll get very excited. Yeah. But then I have to sort of give this sort of sobering explanation.
Yeah,
parents of young children.
But you know what? So we were talking about objective and subjective truth. There's nothing you could say that would defeat my assumption that it was unintentional serendipity.
Well,
I'm not gonna. When you look at, can we talk about Don for a minute? Can we talk about the legacy of Don? Yes. Because what you have to remember about Don is he is a wonderful person, but he's also, don't forget, humble.
Oh, yes.
Humble.
Yeah.
Very humble. Very humble.
Don't forget that,
I was
okay?
say cusses like a sailor. But
just don't forget that.
Very humble.
So when you're talking about the things that went on in the studio and the importance of people to be able to read those, not literal records, not the records, but to read the records of those and what those people feel about Don in the studio and the process and the time period, that is, in my bold declaration, as important as the karma that we carry around with us every single day, if not more important. Because it's actually, most of those people were trying to get rid of their karma, whether they realized it or not, And that's it. So good job, Don. Good job.
Keep it coming.
Okay.
You're doing okay.
What I think I like the most about Don is
let's put
okay,
a
we'll take
nail
it down
on
a notch. Okay, what I sometimes find slightly amusing about Don is when I say to him, "Do you remember this?" and he just goes, "No idea." His memory is he remembers about 5 things.
Yeah. I've defragged my hard drive on a regular basis.
On a regular basis.
No sense keeping. I am. I talked with Ian about this. I love that someone's archiving, I guess. Yeah, the whole punk movement and the music movement in DC. I could never. I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
Why is that?
Talking about the photographs and the videos for shows. I've never taken a video of a show. I just don't like, even though I grew up in Rochester and I've had cameras all my life, I could have bought cameras very, very easily, very cheaply. Just, I don't want to document it. I want to be there and that's it. That holds more treasure and value to me than documenting it and showing people a video or a photograph or anything of that nature. History, I don't care about history in a sense of making it a sacred stone or whatever. Read it, understand it, learn from it, but then toss it aside.
I respect that because I forget a lot of things too, and I think that's why I document them. But do you think
I forget things
people that take videos? Yeah, I've already been. I've shamed myself for having been a video taker, photographer, but only when it's a moment. Like, and I mentioned Big Tony's birthday party, and Dave Grohl got on the bar, and we're like, "Oh my god!" But I understand what you're saying. Do you think we're being impolite or rude? Because I certainly don't want to be.
No, it just, everybody has their own values. I would rather see it and just absorb it and hear it.
It is interesting at live shows how many people are holding up their phones, which is it's sort of a symbol of not experiencing something directly.
Yes.
And it's remarkable how many people. Yeah. The fun part of it is you play a show, and the next day you can see yourself from various angles, which is kind of entertaining. But it's like a weird human thing to just seeing and it's not the same. It's not the same as holding up a lighter.
Yeah,
holding up a lighter is a celebration.
Right. Well, you're making an active choice. You're saying I'm either going to photograph this or video, or I'm going to experience it. And you're right. I make that decision.
Well,
yeah. No, you go ahead.
No. Well, when Antonia was writing the book, she asked me I forget what, can you help me out with some stuff? And I said no. I mean, because I think we went over this in New York City. I really don't want. Here's where I live, and this is what I'm doing, and that is back there. It's not that I don't like it. It's not that I don't value it, but it's the past. Screw it. It's the past.
I'm not even sure it was real.
Right.
I think that was the perfect way for that book to come together.
I'm so glad she did it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful book, and yeah, there's so much exciting there's so much exciting material in it. But I like the fact that you were sort of stayed, to the side, and because what are you going to do? Like, build the architecture to prop yourself up? Like, that's obviously not what your MO is.
No. Yeah, and also to Don's credit, again, let's talk about Don. One of the things that I will give
Can I be a guest on the show? Gee.
Buddy, you were like my very first interview, remember? That was how we met.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It was only because you said you're going to take us out to dinner.
No, that was when you won Guest of the Year, and I took us out for Chinese food. Yeah, that was great. That was a good time. If you ask Don, like Don very rarely will deflect a question, but if you ask him like who the best guitar player he ever saw was at the studio, No, he won't answer because he doesn't want to do disservice to anyone,
Absolutely.
right?
Like I can't. Who was your favorite writer or your
Yeah.
favorite book?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm never going to answer that
Subjective.
question.
Yeah.
And so with that, like it's the same with like when you're then creating the book and saying, well, this is where this goes and this is where this goes, then you're taking this weird active role in like telling your own history, which comes off weird. And it's not bad or good, but it's different. It's different than someone who has something done for him, or done for them.
I would say in a weird way, yes, in a certain way it comes off weird. It would have come off weird to do that. But in another way, that's the way people operate in our social media driven society.
Yeah.
Look at me. This is what I did. Here's a little romantic picture of the life I live. I do this on my social
Yes.
media. I post when I'm on the road. Look at me. I'm a rocker. There's way more. I spend all my time being a book publisher. But on my social media, you'd think I was a full-time musician, which I'm not. I mean, I am always a musician, but I don't work full time as a musician. And people are like, oh, you seem to be on tour year round. And it's like, I did 4 shows then, I did 5 then, and I did 3 over here, and that's my year. But it's like my little social media images. Look at me rocking out with my bass.
Well, but thank God we all like just accepted that that's just marketing and that's what we're doing, And at least that's
Why am I marketing myself? It's
well,
I market my books, and I know why I market my books.
the reason you
books
market
written by other people are
the reason you
brilliant.
market yourself on social media is because you yourself are the currency, and if you don't market yourself, no one's going to buy you. But
I don't know about that, but I mean, it's yeah.
And also, when we were younger, we learned that. We were graded. We're given report cards with grades. And we learned that A is better than F. And we learned that all through life, through years. And so we keep on doing it now. We just have more outlets. We have Facebook. We have all the other gizmos.
Yep.
Hate to say the word gizmos, but that's...
I think gizmo is a great word. That's exactly what it is.
I have a cat named Gizmo.
What about for yourself in terms of, if you had to, and I don't want you don't have to be so specific, but visions, goals, like for yourself creatively as an artist, but for Akashic Record or for the Akashic Books, like what do you see on the horizon? Like what are those things that you still want to do?
I honestly don't have
Nothing?
Truly, I don't have any goals. It's in some ways it's one of my shortcomings as a business person. I will never have like a 5-year plan. Or I can't say never because I don't know what the future holds. But I've never, I'm 57 and I've been running Akashic for 26 years, and I've never had a 5-year plan. We in 2011 we had like a smash hit book that sold millions of copies. And, Publishers Weekly called me up and said, so what's going to change now? And I said, the only change now is that my company has a social safety net that didn't. But I do have a few goals, having said all that. I would like to pay my authors more because the books are selling more, not because, we have a very equitable royalty structure, I believe. I believe it's more equitable than almost all the other publishers. But I want my authors to be earning more money, which means to do that, I have to sell more books. No problem. I mean, that's a perfectly fine goal. And I want to pay my staff and myself better because we live in New York City, and also just my staff is incredible, and they don't deserve, I don't believe in the word deserve, but I would like to see them be paid more money. So those are my goals, is to pay my for my authors, my staff, and myself to maybe earn a little bit more money.
Yeah, but for God's sakes, you would hope any retailer would have those as their goals. How
Any
often do you hear
business.
even someone say that's their business goals? It's never around that. Those are great goals to have.
But the books that I publish, like The Inner Ear of Don Zientara, and all the other books I publish, it's like it'd be hard for me to get better when I'm feeling down in the dumps. I have at work I have a wall of one copy of every book that we've published, and I just have to look at that wall, and it's incredible, and I'm so proud, and I'm like I'm definitely doing something right here, but I don't think that it would be hard for me to, in a weird way, to make the books better, and I'm not saying that Akashic publishes the best books in the world, but I have no interest in competing with the corporate publishers. And I have indie publishing friends that run independent publishing companies, and I can just tell, they're bitter that they can't be in those bidding wars and those auctions and all that stuff. And I have no interest in that. If there's 5 publishers bidding on a book, there's no need for me to be there. I'm not trying to be redundant. I'm trying to do something interesting.
Yeah.
That creates something new that isn't being done. That's happening weirdly on our list less now than before. I have like celebrities and well-known people on the list that could be getting book deals in other places. So that's and I'm a little uncomfortable with that. But on the other hand, I love the books that I'm publishing.
You don't have to do a deep dive in it, but can you just talk a little bit about why you're uncomfortable with that?
Well, because the goal, just like being in a band, I'm a publisher, so theoretically I'm not the creator, it's the writers, but I feel very like creatively stimulated as a publisher. So just like a band, you want to make something wholly original, or not, because most of us aren't delusional, not 100% original, but you want each record to be a progression, to be and to be exploring new ground. Like the last Soulside record, we all feel in the band, we all feel really good about it. It's really a Soulside record, but we were exploring new directions. And so that's what I want out of the publishing company. And if the list is filled with people or filled with books where those books could just be published by another publisher, then why am I needed?
Well, but so what you're talking about is like, I'm down with that, right? But sometimes people have goals and they're very specific about goals. Like they want something to be a certain way, but they're so specific about it that they don't even realize that like what they have is close to what they want, but they're getting too hung up on the specificity of it.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is being proud of what you've made, right? And not necessarily having like so much specificity built into it. Like, like, I want a hit book by this person, right? You're happy that you had hit books, and that's really hard for people to get their heads around. It's hard for me to get my head around. Like, I want the thing that I want in the way that I want it, not just the thing that I want. But I think some of that comes with age. Like, as you start to get older, you realize that the rules aren't that. Yeah. You don't get to have, at least I haven't met anyone who gets exactly what they want in the way that they want it.
One of the wonderful things about being a book publisher, and part of the reason why my life moved, obviously not completely away from music, but why publishing grew, is our list is like eclectic to a fault, because I can publish literally whatever I want to publish. And I think for any kind of company, even if it's not art, it's like if you really specialize on in a certain area, like the more narrow you get, the easier it is to sell something. Mm-hmm. And other publishers have much more narrow focus. Like if we just published, crime fiction, for example, then we would know the whole landscape so well, and we would be further along. But every book we do, it's such a crazy wide range of books that we publish that it makes it really, really, sort of hard to sell. Books are hard to sell no matter what. However, one of the things I didn't like about being a full-time musician, like as I was with Girls Against Boys in the 90s, is the whole life was about this rock band. And my interests are so much bigger than rock music. Even my rock isn't even my favorite musical genre, mm-hmm. And I love playing music. I mean, actually, there's.
So did it become a job then? Like, did it feel like a job?
Well, I mean, technically, it absolutely was a job.
Well, it was. I mean, it was your livelihood, right?
It was my livelihood.
So when I say job, I mean not good. Like, did it feel like a job?
Like work?
Like work?
No.
Right on.
No. I mean, there were big problems, but that wasn't one of them. The hardest part, I think almost any musician would agree, is just getting along with one's bandmates. And I love my pretty much every band I've been in. I love all my bandmates. And Soulside, we love each other to death. But it was much harder when we were 22, mm-hmm. And we were, naive to certain things and took certain things for granted. But so it wasn't that Girls Against Boys started to feel like a job. It was just that I'm really interested in issues of social justice. And while Girls Against Boys would play benefits, and we were all, anti-racist, anti-homophobic, et cetera, we were not a politically oriented band the way, say, Soulside or Scream is. Girls Against Boys, the singer is Scott McLeod, who's the guitar player of Soulside, and Scott is like he's like an aesthetician or a stylist, and it's not Scott's political beliefs are just as strong as mine, but when he's up there singing, that's not what's coming out. And I love that about him.
And that's the way it is with actors. They play parts that they may not be really like. I mean, as a person, they would not want to live that part. So,
Anthony Hopkins says that there's only like 10 movies of his that he'll actually watch. He says like all the rest are garbage. Yeah. You have to go at 6:40. So I want to ask you one more question before you have to go. You just talked about about the 22-year-old self. And oftentimes I like to ask people, if you could give advice, you said you were 57?
Yeah.
So at 57, if you could give advice to your 22-year-old self, what advice would you give that self?
I think it would be just to be more patient with people and realizing if I want people to cut slack for me, the best thing to do is to cut slack for them. Or put another way, if I want people to deal with my bullshit, I better deal with their bullshit.
Yeah.
And I have just as much bullshit as anybody else, and so that's hard, it's not something I've like moved beyond completely, but I can see even just in Soulside, the way that we interact, we're all so much more quote unquote mature. Or maybe I don't like that word, but we've lived many more years, and so we have a lot more years of experience in social relations. And it doesn't mean that we get along 100% of the time, but we just love each other a lot.
Yeah.
And we're so happy that at this stage of our lives that we get to go and just leave everything on a stage. Is just, I feel so lucky.
Well, and I think it's important, like I didn't get to say it to the Scream fellas, but, I don't think there's any coincidence that we're experiencing, a resurgence in a lot of the punk bands coming back to the forefront at the same time that in response to probably the rise in the Nazism and fascism that's occurring. And, for me, thank goodness punk rock exists, because what would we do otherwise? Was it Henry Rollins says, this is what Joe Strummer trained us for, like this is,
I think it's really, really true. I think, and it's I heard an interview during the pandemic with Henry Rollins, in which he was saying basically, like, imagine what the world would look like if you stripped the art out of it, and that's like horrifying.
Yeah.
It's utterly, utterly horrifying, and that actually was helpful for me because back in the day, we'd be driving like all night on a tour. And we'd get into these discussions, and I would bum my bandmates out because I would be saying, you guys seem to think that we're like some benevolent force, like just these privileged white kids driving around in a van playing noisy music is somehow good for the world because we were born privileged and we're going to play our music for them.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
And and they would get mad at me.
Yeah.
And they were more, I think they more believed in the in the value of art. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I don't really like it when artists are like, look how valuable my work is. It's like I cringe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I heard that Henry Rollins, and it was also the pandemic, and during the pandemic, I started to love music even more and love books even more. It was weird. It's like the two things that I sort of love, beyond my family, the most in life got even deeper. And then Henry screwed my head on right when he said that. And I'm still not going to go around being like, oh, we're out here making the world a better place. But it actually makes me more comfortable in my skin as a musician because what would we do without Joe Strummer? Or people got to get up and scream and be visceral about this. We have to feel this. This is... And it really is like it's a gift to the world. I'm not saying my band, but Scream, and Kariki and I, bands of many different genres. But
that is not lost on fans because to fans like I'm not a musician. I'm a fan, and just punk or pop punk or any variation of that genre to me means acceptance brotherhood, check your ego at the door, and you can't imagine how invaluable that is. And so, I don't care what artists say. Whatever art you're making, as long as you're just putting your real self out there and not putting on airs, you're making many people's lives better.
And it's hard, and it's really hard to understand that that's important to the artist too. You have to every once in a while hear that said. Otherwise, you think, "What am I doing here?"
Yep. That's absolutely. And I also like that one of their words was acceptance, because to me, that's one of the things that punk rock. And I think the larger world doesn't know that that's for a certain sector of progressive, like in DC, like acceptance is just punk rock could be a refuge for people. And for weirdos and dysfunctional, for bipolar people, and I love that about punk rock, and I hope that's still there with, young punk rockers
hell yeah.
these days.
It's definitely a tone in this. So I subscribe to Razor Cake, this West Coast scene, and there's at least 2 articles, if not numerous, throughout, that are in that vein, specifically calling out issues and stuff like that. And so it's not political. I mean, although that magazine does get political, it's not within the political atmosphere. It's just an acceptance of meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And including and I don't know how I feel about this yet. I haven't decided. I've seen an uptick in advertisements for people who refer to themselves as punk rock therapists.
George Santos.
I don't know how I feel about this yet.
I think the bands are the therapists.
Yeah, and honestly, like that's part of it. But
man,
what I
is
do
it
understand,
ever therapy, especially whether it's a mosh pit or you're just there standing there with a beer by yourself.
oh well, this therapy is I think more for people who are making the art. Because Razor Cake is definitely geared towards people who are making music, and so I think that's for. They're like, yo, if you're an artist and you're struggling with mental health, like, come reach out. And there's more than one. There's more than one punk rock therapist.
I love everything about that, except for I'm a punk rock therapist.
Yeah,
that's the only part about that I don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Mark Sullivan, who was a co-founder of Akashic, he's a therapist, and some of his people who he works with are musicians, but I don't think you're going to see Mark Sullivan walking around saying I'm a punk rock therapist.
No. Well, now we're talking about marketing, and that sucks.
Well,
marketing always.
But I understand. Of course, I also understand marketing.
Well, and I
probably do stuff with Akashic. I know I do stuff that's cheesy. So
I appreciate.
So I shouldn't.
I appreciate you admitting that you create an illusion on your social media. Because that's.
It's not an illusion. He is a rocker.
You curate the experience.
Yes.
You curate the experience. And so what I would offer up is, what I sometimes feel really weird about is I work really hard to make this show showing people in their best light. So I will sometimes remove things when they talk back on themselves or they defeat a point that they were making earlier and stuff like that. But sometimes I think about like, well, I really should be showing people at their most honest self. But then I'm like, no, this is StageCraft.
It depends on what the goal is.
Yeah, StageCraft is all about like.
I'm a booster. I publish books. I'm trying to shine a light on things, so I relate to that completely. I'm not trying to show a mixed.
We didn't put the stinkers in the inner ear book. He didn't put any of the stinkers. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. For any book, I'm sure endorsements that you get, you don't publish the bad ones.
Right.
It's always the people who have something nice to say about it. Like everything.
We do have to wrap up because we have another guest coming that we have to do. And you said you had to go at 6:40. You have practice tonight.
Yeah.
Would you mind just saying your name and the band and publisher that you're representing today?
I'm Johnny Temple. I am the bass player of Soulside, and I am the publisher of Akashic Books.
Beautiful.